Welcome back. I see lots of people joining us again. Thank you for joining us this early for the folks on the Pacific Coast, as well as the folks in I believe it's the eastern side of Australia. Once again, we've got everybody from across the entire globe joining us this morning. Just giving a few seconds to see who else pops in. There we go. Excellent. Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever it is you are. I hope you've had an excellent past few hours since we were last together, and very grateful for you joining us again today. I hope yesterday was exciting enough for you to warrant your attention again with us today. So thank you for joining us. It would be great to know where you are from. So please drop in a quick hi in the chat and let us know where you're coming from. I'm curious to know where everybody lives now that yesterday you all forgot or did not know where I live. I also hope you had a chance to Google it. And for those of you who are missing out on the joke, we had an exciting trivia session during the breaks yesterday. We will be doing that again today, both breaks. So currently Sam is in the lead. We'll see if he can defend his title second day in a row. But it's really good to have you all here. So today's sessions are primarily focused on supporting work streams. We've got a great bunch of sessions from a great bunch of updates from the core team, the code and quality security team. Great updates on documentation. It will be a great opportunity for you to see what's been powering the new version of the Mojo Loop documentation. We've also got some great updates from folks within the Mojo Loop ecosystem. We'll hear from Microsoft, we'll hear back from the Coil guys on Tiger Beetle. It's been a while since we had from Tiger Beetle. I still wonder if Tiger Beetle smells like bubblegum, as I marketed it last time. We'll also hear some updates on CBDC. Lots of folks of late have been interested in that topic in the recent past. So this hour, we will begin with the core team update led by Sam, Kummary, Miguel, Barros, and Vijay Guthi. So I'll pass it over to Sam. Sam?
Thank you, Simeon. Hello, everyone, and thanks for the reminder about the lead. Humbled by that one,
You're welcome.
Hopefully it's a thing that keeps us all going in different time zones, especially those who are not in favorable ones. Let me start sharing my screen. Simeon, if you can confirm that you can see it, we'll continue.
I can see it. Yep.
Thank you. So everyone, as you know, we have the Mojo Loop core releases and maintenance team here today. Even though there are many contributors, as we will see in the coming slides, today Miguel from the core team releases and maintenance updates. We'll have David Fry from the infrastructure as code section, and then we'll have Vijay and myself talking about the testing toolkit. There are many contributors, as you know. Some of them may not be listed here, but wanted to recognize many people who made commits and otherwise supported work on the Mojo Loop core. If you have contributed and if your name is not here, please reach out to Miguel or myself, and we'll make sure that it is listed here. And we try to include any and everyone who made commits to the Mojo Loop versus core repositories. Thanks, everyone. So today, we thought we'll look at the work done on the Mojo Loop core during the past program increment, PI 16. We'll look at what we started off with as goals, what was done, and then we'll cover specific updates on Mojo Loop releases, infrastructure as code, testing toolkit, and finally wrap up with looking at the roadmap for this program increment, PI 17. Before going into the details here, looking at a PI overview, we've just wrapped up PI 16. In PI 17 here, as well as we kick off phase 6, as you can see here in the slide when we upload on GitHub various years of breakdown. And we also listed here the the themes of this year, the active work streams, and these will be confirmed on the last day, as you know, tomorrow, as we do the roadmap and planning section there. So here was our deck from the product council or the release train engineering, where we had 5 big epics here. So 2 of them are big releases, Mojo Loop 13.10 and V14. And then we had some items to support the good work being done in many other work streams, like the infrastructure as code, the business operations, and another one about supporting the 3 PPI enablement team as well. And then a success defined how, and we have a criteria there as well. Let's quickly see where we stand there before we go into the details. So on the Mojo Loop 13.10 official release, we have a couple of items. One release related to a test, adding tests to the patch notifications, and then there is some instability with a couple of tests, like 2 test failures that are happening. So those 2 issues are pending, but we do have a release candidate and is available as a development release. Apart from that, we'll hear from David on the ISC stream updates. So that is going well, though it is little difficult to measure that, but we'll see the details there. We weren't able to publish V14. We're moving that into the roadmap for this program increment. We just want to take care of 13.10, and then we already have a POC there, which is done, led by Miguel and others from the community as well. But on coming to the bonus items, on the other hand, we were able to support other work streams as well. We have end-to-end tests and charts or components that are required to deploy 3 PPI components. We discussed that yesterday. Those are present in main Mojo Loop charts or branches as well. So the objective status, we have a release candidate available as dev release. V14, we weren't able to do that, but the others are looking good. I marked in different color because it's a little difficult to measure some of the things there. But we can say for sure that the support has been there for adopters and implementers. There have been times where we need to support them by debugging issues when they had, and then log bugs and prioritize them and fix them as well. In the numbers, so as I was saying, there were about 12 bugs fixed in PI16. I can say that these are like high priority bugs that have unblocked a lot of issues or unblocked some other work streams as well. And then we have some other features, especially related to version management, version negotiation, and things like that, that were covered during this PI. So this is just the core items. It doesn't include the infrastructure as code, DevOps, and other items that were done during this PI. For anyone curious to look at these, I provided a link here. We can look at that. With that, we'll wrap up the overview part of the presentation, and then we'll go into the details of the Mojo Loop releases. I will pass on to Miguel, who will take us through these details. Thank you, Miguel.
Thanks, Sam. Share my screen here. Please let me know if you can see it.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So we've been working hard on 13.10 release, this PI, which includes several, well, includes some vital fixes and filled in some missing features that we identified while working with live deployments of Mojo Loop. I'll cover some of these key changes in the release notes. Let's actually follow the link here on the presentation here, and I'll take you guys through it. And the reason I'm doing this is because I want people to be able to find these release notes in future. So if you go to the main Helm repository, all that information is generally available on the releases here. You can click on the releases here. and you can actually have access to, for example, 1302. So 1310 is now a release candidate, so it's not actually published yet. So once it is, you will see it here. But alternatively, you can go to change logs, and there we have all the changes also documented. So for example, we have 1310 here. So moving on to that, I'll cover the new features first. So we have 2314, and this is pretty much integrating the continuous growth settlement test cases into the golden paths. So whenever we run now the standard golden paths, the continuous growth settlements are now tested as part of this. There is, however, an issue that's been introduced as a result of this. I'll cover that later on, and it's something we want to fix before finally releasing 1310. The next one is 2505. We have fully implemented an account lookup sub-ID error callback endpoint. This functionality was actually there, but it was not hooked up for some reason, so that's now been correctly hooked up and tests added as well to verify that going forward. In 2450, 2532, it's pretty much the introduction of the third-party API. So basically, all the third-party API components now have Helm charts being introduced, etc. So now you can deploy those third-party components using the Helm just by configuring and enabling them. 2589. So we've added resource version configuration parameters for all outbound requests within the SDK scheme adapter. So that's now there and available. And moving on to the major bug fixes, or the most important ones, I would say is 2522. So we've now included the database migration scripts that will now create or upgrade all the tables to support UTF-8, which is great. So now we can have interesting characters and all that kind of stuff that you would expect to see in more non-traditional Western kind of scripts. 2525, this is now transfers in version 1.1, the Fsb API spec using the patch notifications, was not correctly assigning a settlement window. So that's a big one. And that's been fixed. So that's good. 2527, this is a minor fix just for some incorrectly assigned or assigning destination headers. That's also been fixed. 2549, so we had a regression issue here with the SDK scheme adapter. Since it's now been updated to use the API snippets to auto-generate its interfaces, etc. So we had a slight problem that needs to be fixed now to support currencies, test currencies specifically, so XXX and XTS, etc. So issues 2534 all the way up to 2538, that's basically fixing our handling and validations of the Fsb API. So when we have in our headers, we accept, or the content type is v1.0, 1.0, etc. We've basically fixed an issue, and we've made it consistent in terms of how we handle those validations, as well as how we do those configurations. In 2557, we just had a minor issue with error notifications for header sources, so that's been fixed as well. SDK scheme adapter was not returning a party sub-ID correctly on 2574. And 2584 and 2585, this was fixing some issues with the bulk API adapters that were not handling the extension lists correctly. Along with this, and this is actually not mentioned in new features, but along with this, we've also included a bulk API adapter test as part of the standard Helm tests. These are disabled by default. And as is the bulk API adapter. If you enable the bulk API adapter, make sure you enable those tests if you want to validate them as well. Later on, there's a section that shows you how you can do that. Testing Toolkit, there's actually been quite a few fixes with testing Toolkit. So new features wise, we've improved some of the, or cleaned up some of the init configurations and system configurations. There's now labels that have been added to basically improve some of the identification, description, test cases, as well as added support for detailed name, descriptions, and grouping within test reports to improve that readability. And there's also introduction of a third-party SDK outbound API support, which is needed basically to test the third-party API tests. Under the bug fixes for testing toolkit, I'm sure Vijay will cover this a bit more in detail. Some fixes for TLS connectivity in hosted mode, and some minor other fixes as well for the callback maps, and also some UI fixes for some stop buttons not working intermittently. In section 4, we have a list of all the components that have been upgraded, the version that it was initially from the previous release and the version that we've upgraded to, that's there. And in section 5, we have all the release notes. So you can follow these links to actually see what has been changed for that specific component within the Mojo Loop release. We have no changes in operational chart versions. We have 2 items in breaking changes, although they're not really breaking. They're more here to make you aware of if you're going to use 13.10, you need to make some potential changes to the value file that you use for deploying it and managing or upgrading it through Helm. The first is testing toolkit. The TLS related configuration parameters have been moved from the user config to the system config. And the second is with the introduction of the bulk test jobs, we've renamed the tests for 2 reasons. One, to make them more apparent as to their use. So previously we just had like bulk Ttk test validations. That's been renamed to bulk Ttk test validation GP for golden path. And now there's also one for bulk that's been introduced as well on the right side here. And also to shorten them because there's also a length restriction that we need to kind of adhere to with the Kubernetes API. So once again, those are not breaking. Those are just things that you need to be aware of if you're going to upgrade. You need to make sure that you've modified your configurations to reflect these changes. Some upgrade notes. The Mojo Loop simulator, if you have rules for the Mojo Loop simulator, previously the library that we use for the rules processing, there's a path configuration that you can configure. It did not matter whether you had an empty value, but now you need to have a prefix of $1 if you're using the root. Be aware of that. You can follow this link for more information. And also be aware the following environment variables have been added to the testing toolkit default values. So be aware that you may want to override these and add these. Moving on to testing notes, pretty much the usual that you would expect from our testing notes. The important thing is, yeah, as always, we recommend that you use the testing toolkit for your testing and validation of Mojo Loop. It is more performant, it's more consistent than using the legacy Postman tests. The only new item here that I previously mentioned was, above is also, as I mentioned, the bulk API Helm tests. Be aware that you can go to the documentation here to read on how to enable and test them. Known issue-wise, pretty much the same known issues from 13.0.1, so that's the previous release. Once again, those should be fixed in version 14 when we actually release it. There is one issue here that's been added, and I mentioned previously, so with the introduction of the CGS tests, so the GP tests, there is a problem. It's not really a problem, but it's due to the async nature of how the CGS tests operate and the way that we have currently them configured. Intermittently, they will fail. It's just a timing issue. So if you rerun them, they will pass. We want to have this also fixed for 13.10 final release as well. And lastly, once again, we also have a list of the contributors. Once again, thanks so much for everyone who contributed to this release. Moving back to the slide, there's also a command here on how you can deploy the release candidate. The most important things here being these additional parameters that you need to add on. So you need the --deval and the version, and here's the specific version that you can use for the release candidate if you wish to deploy or install or upgrade an existing installation. We can access the release reports just to see how we've been doing. And show you a bit in terms of what's been holding up 13.10 release. So we've pretty much completed everything that we had on our backlog. We just have 2 items and actually blockers at the moment. We have a big feature that we want to introduce, and that's implement patch notifications for the V1.1 Fsb Api specification for failure scenarios. So we have it for the happy path, but we realized actually we're missing that for the failure scenarios, and that's something that's being added in. This is pretty much ready to go. We're just now adding the tests into the TTK to be able to validate this as well. And the second is, once again, that intermittent failures in the GP tests for the CGS test cases that we want to also resolve. So those are the two major issues that we want to resolve before actually doing the final release. And we also would like to try and include the third-party API tests as well. That's not a blocker, but I think we should definitely try to achieve that for completeness. The last point on the slide, so in the future, we have version 14, as Sam also previously mentioned, in our future release map, and we want this to be the focus for this PR after we've released 13.10, and we need this to support several other working streams such as AIC and live deployments going forward. On this slide, we pretty much have the same, oops, sorry, let me go back. We have not progressed as much as we hoped for version 14 in this PR, mainly due to the work as previously covered in the version 13.1.0 release. And as a result, I've included the updates from the previous PR with regard to the POC at the top. However, I'm happy to report that we've had several new contributions in this PI that I would like to focus on, specifically more in section 3 over here. Automated CI/CD validation tests are now up and running with all pull requests and releases. This includes tests against 3 different versions of Kubernetes from version 1.20, 1.21, and 1.22. There's also added support for both containerd and ingress classes. And these issues are thanks very much to Tom and Lewis for all their great work and the improvements on this. And lastly, we also have the business operation framework components, such as the finance portal version 3, which has been implemented using the version 14 Helm chart patterns that we've defined as part of the POC. This is great as it also helps us validate that version 14 pattern that we'll be using going forward for all our charts. And thanks very much to Vijay and Yevon for their hard work here and their contributions in improving version 14, the standards and patterns, etc., that we've been using. Going forward, we continuously welcome any community feedback on what target platforms should be supported by Mojo. So in other words, what ingress controllers people are using, what Kubernetes versions people are using, even if the underlying infrastructure that you're using, that kind of information would be really useful. And this kind of information is very useful, not just for improving our Mojo Helm charts going forward, but also for other streams such as AIC, infrastructures, code, etc., who are dependent on this, on Helm and also this information. But I would say most importantly, once again, we plan to continue migrating and refactoring the legacy Mojo Helm charts so that we can have a version 14 release fully tested and published in this PI. And as always, any help here would be greatly appreciated. So feel free to contact me or Sam if you're interested or able to help. Even the smallest contribution is an amazing thing. So thanks very much.
Thank you, Miguel. With that, we'll move on to the infrastructure as code update from David. David, when you're ready, please. Yeah.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, David, thank you.
Great. So hello, everybody. I wanted to do a brief update on where we are with the infrastructure as code. Currently, and the work that we're doing on version 2 of that, which is a refactoring of how the ingress is treated, as well as some other elements that I'd like to outline, and then some future direction roadmap topics that we're currently planning out. So just to summarize, in the last convening, we discussed the different repos that are available publicly on the Mojo Loop GitHub org. And there are some listed here on item 1 there. The current version of the IAC is supporting version 12 and version 13. And one of the roadmap items is obviously support for version 14. We're also in the current version supporting multiple Kubernetes versions, including 1.17 and 1.21 that we're actively testing against. There is no particular reason why those only those 2 could be supported, but those are what we're currently have tested labs running. Also, we've integrated the Biz Ops effort into the IAC, as was outlined previously. We've done some improvements in that I'll mention on the next slide, as well as we have some future work that we would like to incorporate in order to optimize the identity and access management portion of the Biz Ops solution. So Finance Portal v3 is testable within the IAC, and the payment manager integration has been done in order to allow us to do end-to-end testing using payment managers, 2 payment managers to do end-to-end tests with mutual TLS and full security. So that's kind of a summary of where we're at in terms of the current version. So I'd like to talk about the updates that are in progress right now that I mentioned for what I'm calling version 2. And version 2, because really this is a much awaited move away from the current WSO2 focused infrastructure. And for those of you who have been attending convenings for the past couple of years, you'll know that this is an item that's often discussed, but never really gets enough traction to get over the finish line. So it's really going to be front and center in the future work when I start discussing it, is the WSO2 issue and removing WSO2 from the equation. So in preparation of that, we've cleaned up ingress substantially. And the approach up until now has been to use HA proxy in both the ingress and the egress. So HA proxy was sitting in front of the Kubernetes cluster in a standalone virtual machine, and the egress or callback HA proxy was also a standalone virtual machine. And those are used in order to broker the mutual TLS on the inbound and outbound side, as well as controlling whitelists and other security features. So there was a lot of, let's say, redirection happening in multiple locations involving WSO2, HA proxy, NLBs, etc., and it needed some cleanup. So the ingress has been completely redone. We're using 2 ingress controllers, one for internal, one for external traffic, and we are doing all of the SSL termination on the ingress controller. We've created an HA proxy that for egress, so a forward proxy that actually manages the client certificates for communicating with the external DFSPs, and that is now running within Kubernetes in a container as opposed to a standalone VM. So this allows us to have better management and logging, etc., of these of the ingress and egress proxies that are used. So that's much better for management. And all the whitelisting and SSL offloading is being managed with Vault. So this is all cleaned up and working as expected. So now the WSO2 containers are also managed via the ingress controllers instead of standalone node ports. So that was a big effort in order to get us to the point of being able now to address the WSO2 API gateway and the ISKM as services like anything else. And now these become pluggable, and now we're in a position to unplug WSO2 services and put replacements in. So that's the ingress topic. Quickly, external DNS and cert manager are now being used in the IAC. They are being used in the payment manager code, but now they've simplified tremendously the management of certificates and external DNS for the switch. And we've also moved away from using internal DNS names for any of the endpoints that we're accessing, and that includes the finance portal, the Biz Ops endpoints, and connection manager, etc. So now everything is using publicly addressable DNS names, and they're all using TLS. So no HTTP anymore for any of those endpoints. The certificates for the Biz Ops and the other hub operator endpoints are all being managed by Let's Encrypt, and the API access is being managed using a Vault issuer for Cert Manager. So those are using internal certs to Vault. I already mentioned the fact that we've gotten rid of the external VMs. So that involved just migrating to using Nginx for the ingress, and then we did use a slightly modified HA proxy Helm chart for the egress, and that's been forked in the Mojo Loop repo. Some minor Helm chart changes to support Vault. So Elasticsearch, Kibana, APM, and FluentD. These have been removed, and we have migrated to the Loki stack. This is Elasticsearch in particular is a beast to manage. It requires a lot of resources and practically requires a subject matter expert in order to maintain, which is a little overkill for a logging solution. So the Loki stack is much easier to use and maintain, and I'm very happy with it so far from my limited logging perspective, the way that I'm using logging. Looking to get more feedback from operations and the actual troubleshooting of issues using it, but it looks to be very promising. Kibana is then removed from the equation, which was causing somewhat of a security issue because it doesn't actually provide any authentication to the Kibana UI in the open source offering. So we were unable to manage access to Kibana. So that was all in all, it's I'm happy that we're removing a bunch of components that we can consolidate onto a single pane of glass for operations, being Grafana. The additional work item that would bring to us is moving the event streaming processor to use the Grafana stack instead of EFK. So that's an item that we would want to put on the roadmap in order to get that functioning on the Grafana stack. So enhancements to Biz Ops. That's the work that we did in order to integrate Biz Ops into the IAC involved standing up a new identity server key manager in order to manage the users and access for the Biz Ops work. So we we did some modifications to the release and patched the ISKM release that we're using so that we were able to support the Ori stack. And now we're able to use the same ISKM for API access as we're using for Biz Ops. And we've also moved all of the Biz Ops endpoints to use TLS and use externally addressable DNS names. And I just note that when I say externally addressable, I mean that these DNS names are actually, externally accessible from a DNS perspective. That doesn't mean that you can reach them without being on the VPN. So all of these operational, hub operational endpoints are only accessible over the VPN, but the name would be resolvable using DNS in any case. So the removal of add-ons cluster, this is part of the move away from using standalone simulators and using payment manager instances to run end-to-end tests with full security. As I mentioned, that's already a capability of the IECs to run those tests using the payment managers. And so the only reason to run the extra cluster, the add-ons cluster, was to run the simulators for end-to-end tests. So we removed the add-ons cluster and the simulators in order to support a more economical cost of running the switch. So it reduces the cost by about 45%, which is significant. So that's been removed. And the last item that I'll mention is the support for Ttk Test. Vijay is going to talk a bit about that, but we're able now to, within the GitLab pipeline, execute the Ttk test. So that's working now, and happy that that's the way that we're going to be running tests going forward. So we'll have Ttk Test actually running the platform through the full Golden Path execution. And then we have the end-to-end test using the payment managers to prove that the security is functioning with access from external clusters to the switch. So just briefly on the roadmap. So we've supported the business ops framework. I'm just kind of listing items from the previous presentation that we did, marking that as done. The Helm 14 testing in IAC, that's a work in progress, but that's definitely high on our priority list. So the support for Ttk and version 13 Golden Path, that's done. Payment manager onboarding automation. So what that is referring to, having payment managers be able to negotiate the security items such as client certificates for mutual TLS, IP whitelists, and JWS key trading. That would be done via the APIs of Connection Manager. And so that is a work in progress that we're definitely a high priority that we're working on. And now the replace WSO2 item, as I mentioned in the beginning, that's driving a lot of the work that's already happened in the V2 space. So it's in a design / POC stage. The ISKM we're going to be replacing with Keycloak, and the API manager, we're looking to leverage the work that we've already done on the Ori stack that's been used with for the Biz Ops framework. So we want to leverage that and integrate that with the ingress controller. And the first pass of that would be to make use of the Nginx ingress controller and integrate it with Oathkeeper as well, and Oathkeeper integrated with Keycloak. So those are the roadmap items, and that's all from the IAC update. So thanks, Sam.
Thank you, David.
I have a quick question for David. There's another.
Sure.
So as you talk about the migration away from WSO2, I know we had some sensitivities coming in from Huawei, perhaps some concern because of all of the investment made in getting WSO2 to work, that bringing in a replacement, it feels like it could be Groundhog Day to go through all of that again. Do you believe that the migration path won't be that is the reintroduction of new VPN-facing API code that will not introduce that same kind of disruption that we had in getting WSO2 to work, which I recall was like an 18-month exercise?
Well, so I don't know exactly the changes that you're referring to in terms of VPN facing. We can have a follow-up discussion on that. I don't see that much impact to the external users from what I'm discussing. It should be zero impact, except for how does the token get, the bearer token get provided, and even that is using standards. So I don't see there being much of a impact for the DFSPs. But I'm happy to go through that in further detail. I think my argument for not remaining with WSO2 is that we've done, as you mentioned, a lot of work in order to automate the WSO2 configuration, but that is very version dependent on WSO2.
Oh, I see.
And very brittle in the sense that there's a lot of curl calls that are happening to the ISKM and API manager components that will break if we do an upgrade of WSO2. So now, given the log4j issue that just came up recently, we dodged a bullet there because we're on an old enough version of both ISKM and API manager that we didn't have log4j version 2 running. If we had been slightly ahead of the curve in versions, we would have been affected and we would have had to patch. Now, as I mentioned on the Biz Ops summary, I did work on patching ISKM in order to support the Biz Ops requirements from an OIDC perspective. It was, I wouldn't want to wish that on my worst enemy. So I don't want to be in the position of having to patch our current versions in order to stay on versions that are compatible with the config code that we have. And I think that the easiest way out of this solution is to go with cloud native solutions that are flexible, that are being supported by the Kubernetes and cloud native communities. That gets us out of this prison that we're in right now.
Fair enough.
But I'm happy to have a conversation about what you think and what Mwaldi thinks the impacts would be of changing out of WSO2 so that we can address those in a...
That's the flag I want to plant here, is that as we make these choices for all the good reasons you've outlined and the improvements that come, each one will have, in essence, an upgrade debt that comes with it for those that are already using something. And the benefits may be less obvious in the short term. Obviously, getting to a better, more solid platform as we go forward, one has to be super sensitive to evidence that this would have been a good choice to have done earlier. For example, as you point out, avoiding log4j. With that in mind, so you mentioned on point 5b here that did I understand that we're using Nginx as the ingress? So they have some solutions in this space. Their stuff appears to be kind of mixed open source / subscription based. I'm not sure what to call it. And we have to be somewhat careful there, but I assume you're using the free Nginx.
Yeah, I'm only talking about the. So it is confusing with Nginx. I'm talking about the Ingress-Nginx project, which is open source and is hosted on the Kubernetes org GitHub.
Oh yeah, okay, I'm with you. Yeah, so that's the contributed open source version of that.
Exactly.
Okay. And the final question that goes with that then is, you mentioned going to publicly addressable DNS, and what you mean by that is not private within a particular pod, but now in the, I hate the word public, but what you mean is VPN-wide DNS. And do you have, though, a resolver, a single common resolver for the VPN, or is it kind of every man for himself?
So what I'm referring to is as a public zone from AWS's perspective. So not a private zone. So previously we were using a, let's say, a .internal private zone within Route 53. And all of those addresses were being generated. So for Finance Portal or for Connection Manager, all those DNS entries were being generated in that private zone. And they were only resolvable if you were on the VPN. So now we're using only publicly resolvable. So the public zone that we create would be like mojoloop.live. And all of the addresses now that we're generating are being generated in that .live public zone and are addressable using your standard DNS servers.
But they, again, are not reachable or resolvable from outside of our program environment. And likewise, the pre-production environment can't see the live environment.
Correct. So the DNS will resolve to a private network, and you can only access that IP when you're on the VPN.
Okay, thanks. But you did not require a common resolver in order to do that. So it's not critical that we don't have that situation. So you're basically just using standard DNS infrastructure now. Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Thanks for the question, Miller. Thanks, David. We are seeing here that Mojoloop is rapidly maturing with infrastructure as code, where we're not only seeing more cost efficiency, but also ease of deployment, and there is rigor in validation and testing. Let me share my screen again. Can you see it?
We can.
Yes. Thank you. With that, we'll continue discussing the updates on the testing toolkit, and after that, roadmap. So on the Mojoloop testing toolkit, we'll again go back to the slide, the goals we had for PI16. Two big items we had were that we want to have the Mojoloop training program course for testing toolkit published. And this is a big category, support for teams that are either currently using testing toolkit or are in the process of adopting it as a tool for validation and other purposes. So the big milestone we hit this PI. So most of the work for this has been done in the previous program increments, but in this PI, as we heard in the first session from Simeon and Jane, the training program has been published, and we also saw that in the demonstration that we had for business operations framework. Thank you to the team and Paul Baker for using the testing toolkit for showing end-to-end transfers and demonstrating how easy it is to use and for various purposes. So we did hit those goals. There was one item where item number 3 here, any open API definition, essentially a Swagger file or YAML, can be easily added or onboarded using the UI. So this is still possible. For synchronous APIs, it is very straightforward. There is some work we wanted to do for the asynchronous APIs that involve callbacks like the Fsb interoperability API, where the mappings need to be added, but we couldn't get to that. Instead, there are some items we highlighted here. There are a lot of test coverage improvements. We were able to merge, we meaning the core team and the Ttk team as well. We have tests for a continuous cross settlement, bulk, as Miguel covered earlier. And we also have PISP or 3PPI, third party end-to-end tests that are now in the testing toolkit. And so there's been tremendous improvement in test coverage. There is also enhanced support for running on deployments. As we've seen, we have the infrastructure as code support. So David and Vijay worked on, and with others support, worked on getting the testing toolkit as the tool of support for running end-to-end tests. So these are the where we are with respect to validating. And we had to define how we're defining success. A couple of items here. Obviously, the MTP course is published. That's a big win. I would encourage everyone to try it out. And then we said that we'll have at least one existing implementer adopting testing toolkit for validating switch deployment. I would say, based on what I'm hearing, we know that Ttk has adopted it. We know that IAC has adopted it for sure. We also have had several meetings with Mawali, and through Biz Ops framework, we know that Myanmar is interested in using this moving forward as well. So we consider that as a success as well. Vijay will cover details on infrastructure as code integration. But at a high level, we see the items we discussed, MTP course, integration with IAC, support for teams that have adopted testing toolkit or in the process of adopting. And of course, as usual, there are some minor feature improvements, test case additions, and bug fixes as well. The testing toolkit outline, so there are, I think, about 7 sections there that talk about why Ttk is needed, where it fits, how to use it, the very basics. So there is like even in the initial part, there is a quick start guide that can be used by anyone, like product, regulatory, QA users, and then we'll go into the details to support developers and QA users as well. So the Ttk, how Ttk can be used in validating deployments and regression testing. Currently, the core team uses that in a lot of ways as well in end-to-end testing and regression testing. How Ttk can be used to accelerate development, for demonstration, how it can be used for onboarding the FSPs and users, and then some advanced use cases as well. There is a lot of work being done even now, where Ttk is being integrated with the payment manager, so that it's closely tied there, so it can be used for end-to-end testing even by FSPs as well, as they test their own integration with the Mojo loop switch. I will stop there and pass on to Vijay to give us more details on the updates on the testing toolkit work. Thank you, Vijay.
Thanks, Sam. Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, Vijay, we can see you and hear you.
I'm Vijay Kumar, working for Modusbox as solution architect. I'm here to give some update on testing toolkit. Let me share my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Slide deck. Okay. So apart from MTP course, we supported IAC workstream to integrate testing toolkit for regression tests. So I will cover that in the next slide. And we supported the teams who wants to adopt testing toolkit based on their use cases and also their deployment scenarios. And we did some minor feature improvements, like now we can generate test case definition report using testing toolkit CLI command line client. The use case for this is we can integrate that in the CI/CD of the test cases repository. Once we make any changes in the test cases, we can download the test case definition report in the nice HTML format. It can be used for business purposes. And we worked on some test case additions. We updated the Fsb Api version from 1.0 to 1.1, and we are always making sure that the testing toolkit test cases is updated respective to Helm version. And also we worked on some bug fixes, either in the UI or in the test execution itself. So testing toolkit in ISE. So this is GitLab interface. And here we created a CI/CD pipeline for the testing toolkit test cases. So we are using testing toolkit command line client to trigger the test case. As you already know, testing toolkit is already running in the ISE because it's part of Mojo. We are just triggering that using the testing toolkit command line client in the CI/CD pipeline. And we configured the environment variables properly based on the deployment and the callbacks and the callback URLs. So this is the happy path, and we can see the job. This is the output of the command line. And also we are storing the artifacts like the report in HTML format in the GitLab artifacts. We can download that report from the artifacts section here. These are some useful links. We are actively supporting the adapters of testing toolkit, and we are giving information about the documentation, and there are some nice video tutorials here. We will share this slide deck to the community. Apart from Mojo training program, you can use these links for the to get started with testing toolkit. And also you can reach to us. We will conduct some brainstorming sessions if you want to adapt testing toolkit. Thanks, Sam.
Thank you, Vijay. There is a question from Tom Daly. Is there a reason we are using Circle CI and GitLab for CI/CD for various parts of Mojo? Should we consolidate on one of the two? Vijay or Miguel, do you want to address that?
So GitLab is used in ISE, but the Circle CI is used in the build process. Miguel, do you want to add anything?
Yeah. So the reason we're using Circle CI is because it was a tool that offered us the ability to build everything in an automated fashion, and they offered open source projects the ability to build on them. So that's one of the reasons why we use Circle CI. GitLab, we haven't really started using GitLab. That's something that we should maybe start looking and considering though. I mean, the GitLab CI/CD capabilities have vastly improved over the last year or two. So that's something I definitely would love to consider and look at going forward. At the moment, we generally should be mainly only using Circle CI. So I don't think we're really using GitLab much at the moment for CI/CD stuff.
Yeah.
The only time yeah, go for it.
No, in terms of building the different portions of Mojo or the different repos within the Mojo org, there are some that are being built using GitHub Actions, and there are some that are, and most of them are using Circle CI. So there's no parts of Mojo from a product perspective that are being built using GitLab. GitLab is only being used for the actual infrastructure as code to be built into an environment. So, and the reason why GitLab was chosen was because you can run it as a standalone server that has the Git repo capabilities as well as CI/CD pipeline capabilities, and you can run it for free. So for a standalone environment that you wish to stand up, we gravitated towards using GitLab because it's a self-contained suite of products that allows you to have CI/CD capabilities for building out an environment using Mojo Loop as well as other third-party components, right? But there might be a little confusion in the question, whether the question is, are we using Circle CI and GitHub Actions for CI/CD for various parts? And the answer is yes. But GitLab is not being used for any of the product, Mojo Loop product build actions.
Yeah. Thanks for clarifying that, David, Miguel, and Vijay. And it was a good question. Thank you, Tom. So we are out of time. So I'll have a closing comment, Simeon. Thank you, and I'll pass it on to you. We are seeing a good convergence of various things here. So between the infrastructure as code, we have the 3 PPI features that are now brought upstream and into Mojo Loop. And then we also have the business operations framework using the latest version of Mojo Loop charts and basing that out of the out-of-box releases. So we have several work streams like Event Finance Portal, V3, everything coming together. And the work that we are building on and we're planning to do in V14 our goal is that it will keep us in good stead as we'll have more and more deployments even before the vNext becomes production quality. Help us in prioritizing things during the roadmap session, and thank you.